today's case and part 2, which is next week's case, will cover child murders. If you are particularly sensitive, we want to honor you in protecting your peace. So these cases may not be for you. We will be moving on April 4th, and we want to ask you to join us then. But for those of you who are interested, let's get into our true crime case for today.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
And we are back. We came back from spring break.
Yes, we had a great time. We hope you also had a great spring break if you were on it or enjoyed your time away from Murder in the Black.
I mean, I'm sure you didn't. I'm sure you did not enjoy your time.
We are glad to be back.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today. Take us away.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
This is Murder in the Black with Steph and MD.
All right, now this case is featured from 3 Evolve. I hope I'm saying your name right, but 3 Evolve. She suggested this crime case, and so, girl, this is for you. And just so you know, girl, I actually heard this case. Now, I heard it, I believe, on maybe Dateline, maybe not, maybe on a different crime show, because I watched them all. But either way, I heard it before. But I want you to know that I am so happy that you suggested it, because it is always good to circle back when you're at a different stage in your life. So let's go ahead. MD, take us away.
Well, Steph, before we go dive into this case, can you give us a title of this case?
Family Massacre.
Okay, Family Massacre. Here we go. On July 8th, 2003, Kelsey Spann made a 911 call to try to get some officers to come out and do a welfare check on her friend, because they didn't show up to the evening service. It was a Sunday, and typical routine was to go to church in the morning, go to lunch in the afternoon, take a nap, and then come back for evening service. And they didn't show up. So she went, like any good friend would do, to figure out what was going on. She was like, something's not right. Her spirit didn't feel well. So she went back to the house to check on them, and she called 911 to see if they could make that welfare check. But after she got off the phone, she decided, well, let me just go check and see if any of the doors are open. Because, of course, by this point, by making that 911 call, she had already called the house. She had already knocked on the door. She already rang the doorbell. So then she called 911. But after she hung up, she decided, you know what, let me just go back and make sure that I can't get in, because she just was antsy and her spirit wasn't settled. So she went to go check on if any of the doors are open, and sure enough, the sliding door wasn't completely closed. So she walks in, and as soon as she gets in the house and starts screaming out for her friend, she sees on the floor a dead body. And this just sends her into a whirlwind. She begins to scream and panic. She runs out of the house and full-blown tears, and she, calls her another one of their friends and tells her, you've got to get here. This is what I saw. And the investigators, they finally arrived about 20 minutes later, and they walked in that same glass door, sliding door, to identify what was going on. And so they also noticed a dead body in the hallway. And they entered a large bedroom where they found 3 victims in the bed. One woman, she was obviously had been shot in the head. And then they saw what was a 2-year-old who was also shot. And then directly opposite of that child, they found another child who was shot in the right temple. So as of this moment, they found 3 bodies in this large queen-sized bed, and all of them were deceased. None of them were alive. So they continued to search the rest of the house, where they ran back into the woman that was in the hallway who was deceased. Now, when they noticed this woman, they find that she has 2 gunshot wounds above her eye. One was below her eye, and then they noticed that there was a handgun next to her. So immediately the investigators began to think, well, maybe this was some kind of murder-suicide plot. But what they soon realized is that there were live bullets in that gun, that it was a .22 gun, and none of the bullets had been fired. And none of those bullets, after they later down the road and do an autopsy, they recognized that none of those bullets from that gun were involved in any of the shootings of these victims. So they were able to rule out this murder-suicide. So what they found were 4 bodies in this house. Now, this raised a very big flag for Kelsey, because Kelsey knew that there should be 5 people, that there were 5 people living in the house. See, there was a missing infant, Steph, who was only 45 days old.
What?
Yeah. Marsh.
Okay.
Go
So,
ahead.
but there's hope, right? Like,
Yeah, like he's just missing. It doesn't mean that he was dead. It just means, okay, we know that there's 4 bodies that are deceased that we found in the house. But Kelsey's like, no, there should be, not there should be, but there were 5 people living in the house.
okay. So because this is incredible. Like, just everything that you're telling us so far. Like, there's 4 people dead. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed
That this baby is still living. And so your reaction is very much like the investigators' reaction. They were like, okay, let's get back in here. Let's now search in a different way. Let's search like we, maybe be a little bit more thorough than we already were, so that we can see if the baby's here. And if not, then we need to. They probably didn't have Amber Alerts back. Oh, no. It was 2003. Let's put an Amber Alert out for this baby.
Had one.
Right? Definitely had. Absolutely. And so they go back in and they go room to room searching for this missing infant, whose name was Marshall Harper. And within 7 minutes of their search, they find little Marshall covered with pillows, shot in the back of his head. He was found in the bed where the other 3 victims were, but he was covered up and hidden from view.
Man.
Who could harm and kill a baby? What kind of animal are we dealing with at this point is what is surfacing and going on in the minds of these investigators and anybody that is like aware of what is happening. Because at this point, they're saying this individual has killed 4 children, or 3 children, and 2 women. So 3 generations just like that were wiped out in one afternoon. This appears so senseless. They cannot seem to make this make sense. So the investigators began to do what they do best, right? Investigate what could possibly have happened here. Was this a scene of a burglary gone wrong? What could be the reason. Was this a hit on this family? But the rooms, they looked ransacked, but it looks like nothing is missing. There was cash and credit cards that were present, and the house actually looked staged. It looked as if somebody was trying to make it appear as if a burglary happened, or a robbery, but it was just poorly executed and obvious to a trained investigator that that's not what occurred here. So then the investigators began to think, like, could this be a threat to the community, or to the extended family of this family? Because they just can't seem to make a lot of this make sense. This occurred in Bakersfield, California, which is the closest major city to Bakersfield is Los Angeles. So they're trying to piece this together. Why nothing like this has really ever transpired in this town? What is the reason? So they began to dive deeper into their victims, specifically the women. So Ernestine was the woman that was found in the hallway on the ground with a handgun next to her. And she was involved in a lot of civil rights activism within the community. She was well known as a community activist and a leader, and someone who was passionate about seeing her people and the people within her community receive justice and fair treatment. And so she helped a lot that were wrongly accused, and she helped set those wrongs to be right. And so they were trying to figure out, was maybe somebody not agreeing with her activism or targeting her in some specific way. So they began to dive down that road. And then I look at Joanie. Joanie was the woman that was shot, that was found in the bed with the 3 children. And she was a former basketball star. She wanted to play in the NBA. She wanted not to play. She wanted to actually be a basketball official. But she used to hoop in high school, and she joined the Pac-10 when she was
after school,
after she graduated college, as an official.
As an official. So she was
on her way. I mean, for her to have joined the Pac-10, that really shows you the trajectory. We have a cousin who actually is very active in trying to be an official for football. And it takes a lot of time and years and a lot of games that you have to get under your belt in order to make it to the next level. You start at Little League, and then you go to high school, and then you go to college, and then you can get to the professional scene.
Right. So it's a stepping stone, and you have to, like MD said, you have to do certain things in order to become an NBA basketball.
And she was well on her way.
For sure.
She ended up giving birth to her oldest son and decided to kind of take a different path.
Yeah.
She fell in love with her son's father. She ended up marrying him, and his name was Vincent, and he was the vice principal at Fremont High School.
Or at Fremont Elementary.
Oh, Fremont Elementary.
Yeah. Fremont Elementary. And it was a happy time for her, because eventually, we know that obviously she had more children.
Right, she did.
And she started a family. And sometimes I kind of want to explore this a little bit, MD. Like, sometimes you can have in your mind what you want to do, right? And it's not to say that Joanie wouldn't eventually go back to the trajectory that she was on, becoming an NBA official. But sometimes when you get married or you have children, you fall in love with motherhood and fall in love with your kids. It's so funny. Like, just today, I walked in from work, and my husband, Joel, he's sitting up watching these videos on his hard drive, on the external hard drive, and he's a tech dude, and he's just watching these old videos of me and my daughter Reagan. And I remember for myself, like, I felt like I always knew I would get married, right? But like, I knew I would have a child, but I felt like I was like, I'm gonna go to work, just gonna work. And then I had Reagan, and I was like, work? Question mark.
I'm not leaving my kids with some stranger.
What are you talking about?
What is happening?
And I really feel like I really kind of saw that in MD. Like, I saw her and I was like, Yeah, right. And then I did exactly what she did. I kind of feel like that probably was Joanie did. She saw her son Marques and she was like, what?
Absolutely. She was like, oh, that's no longer my dream. And sometimes like you could take that and say, oh, she lost sight of her dream, or she gave up on her goal or her dream. But really what it is it's a new imagining of a dream. Like you realize that, you know what? I probably could have had that life and I probably could have found fulfillment, but oh boy, would I have so much fulfillment here. And it's just taking a different path, and who knows, had her life not been cut short, maybe she would have eventually went back down that path once her kids were older and she felt like she
was comfortable enough
to do that. You know, she was still such a young mother.
Sure.
Her youngest was 45 days old.
My God.
Right? So she was still just in the throes of motherhood and loving all that, you know, came with it. Now, Kelsey was, as we know, Joanie's really good friend. I mean, she was like a part of the family. She was more than the friend. She was one of the family. And she was like another mother to the children. And so she, you know, explained to the detectives and the investigators that the last time she saw all 5 victims was that Sunday, July 6th, on 2003, and they went to the Black Angus Steakhouse right after church. And you know, I find that so just it makes me reminisce in a lot of ways.
Back down
right?
memory
It
lane.
does. It takes me back down memory lane of when, you know, you go to church and you're in church and then afterwards you just can't wait to get out and go
Listen,
to
you have to go get something to eat.
You gotta go get some food. You know you hungry. And then afterwards there is no nap like a Sunday nap after church. There's just no nap like it. And so she explains that to the detectives that it was common routine that after church they would go eat, they would come home, they get undressed, they take that church nap, after church nap, and then they would return to church later in the day for the afternoon evening service. And Kelsey, you know, explained to them that it was really odd to her that the family didn't come back to church later that afternoon because this was so outside of their routine. And Joanie and Ernestine, they were women of habit. And, you know, they did the normal routine and the normal thing. And so to see that they didn't come back to church really raised a lot of alarm bells for her. And that's when she knew, hey, something's not right. And so after she couldn't get in contact with them, she knew she had to go to their house. She knew she had to call detectives and see what was happening.
I just, you know, I think that is so interesting that she actually took that extra step to go over there.
I agree.
Because I think a lot of us would be like, man, they must just be asleep. You know, like, I'll holler at them tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times we're like, man, I can't get in touch with this person. And we can even feel in our gut that something is really off. And we'll do a lot of follow-up, but then we don't take that next step to say, okay, you know what? If I don't hear from you, and I have text this if I don't hear from you by this time, I'm about to come to your house. So if you don't want me showing up, you better respond. You know, and then I'm going to follow up. But I do think it's important to really kind of follow your gut at the end of the day, because, boy, you just never know. And had she not, I mean, they were dead, but still, like, it just showed that that they had people that loved them and cared enough for them that they didn't go missing for long.
Right.
And evidence sours over time. You really have this short window of, that's why they have the TV show The First 48. Right. Because it's within those first 48 hours that you really get your key evidence. And so really allowing things to just sit for days and days and days really kind of can sour and ruin the evidence. The evidence. Absolutely.
So in other words, in addition to what do you always say?
I say, innocent or guilty, don't talk, call your attorney.
Okay, in addition to that.
Right. Another key life
murder in the Black-ism.
Right, there we go.
Trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
Because at the end of the day, the worst that could happen is you're wrong. You pull up, and they answer the door.
And they're like, girl, I just don't want to be bothered.
Girl, I was asleep. Okay, well, girl.
Well, girl, you know what? Next time, answer your phone.
Put that ringer on.
Hello, talk to yourself, Steph. Talk to yourself. Preach a sermon to yourself, because I'm gonna tell you something. If I'm about to die,
never call me.
I am calling her husband. I'm not calling her. Okay.
Don't.
Okay, so the investigators, they're listening to this timeline and they're like, yeah, this rings completely true, because when they found Ernestine in the hallway, she was still wearing part of her Sunday outfit from service earlier that day. And also the detectives, you know, as they were getting information back from the coroner's office and the autopsy reports were coming back in, they also were able to say, Kelsey, this was around the time that they were murdered, because they found food, Steph, and I know that you probably perked up when you saw this in the documentary. They found food in the victim's digestive tract that was a part of their meal that, you know, Kelsey spoke of. Steak, potatoes, you know, things that they ate at the Black Angus Steakhouse.
Your stomach's still gonna tell the story.
It's gonna tell the story. And so they were like, okay, so they were able to pin down that, and this is important. You're probably sitting there like, why is this important? Or if you're a true crime head, you know why it's important. But this is super important to the timeline, because now the detectives are able to say that the murders occurred somewhere after 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And so this helps them to really solidify a timeline. Now, they're able to say, like, whoever committed this crime had to have first-hand knowledge about the family and their routine, right? That's why it's important that Kelsey is really the unsung hero of this you know, story, because Kelsey, understanding her friend, knowing her friend, following up with her friend, and then able to talk to the detectives intelligently about what happened that day, what they were wearing, where they went, and how they were creatures of habit, helped the investigators say, okay, the person that did this had to have firsthand knowledge of what the family typically does on a Sunday, knowing that on Sunday they go to church in the morning, go maybe to get something to eat in the afternoon, come home and take a nap. They had to have known that. And so they begin to think maybe this person was actually lying in wait for the family. So the detectives, they asked Kelsey, you know, who was close to the family. Now, you mentioned, we know that Joanie was married, and she was married to this Vincent. What was going on? Where is he? What's going on with Vincent? Why is she not living with Vincent? So they're beginning to kind of explore this whole marriage between Joanie and Vincent. And Kelsey mentions that he took a trip to Ohio to visit family. Because he was actually, as we mentioned earlier, he was an assistant principal. This was in July, so he's on summer vacation. And so he took a trip to Ohio to visit family, specifically to see his brothers, and then he drove to see his mother, who lived in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
So we kind of know the bones of the case, that Joanie, Ernestine, and Joanie's children were killed. Kelsey is kind of giving us a solid timeline. And so police are really trying to figure out, well, what's going on with Vincent? We really got to find out what's happening with Vincent. And before they could even dig their teeth or their fingers into what's happening with Vincent, they get a phone call from Elizabeth City, North Carolina Police Department. And they informed them that Vincent and his brother, his mother, sister, and his brother Melvin were at the police department because they heard some kind of way that Vincent's brother heard that Vincent's family were killed. And they waited at the police department until detectives were able to fly down to North Carolina to question and to talk to detectives. And so they wanted to interview him because they wanted to really ask some very pertinent questions. I mean, as you can imagine, they want to ask some questions like, who would do this to your family? When was the last time you spoke to Joanie? I mean, we understand that this is terrible for you, but we really need your cooperation. I mean, and they were sensitive to the fact that his whole family had been killed. I mean, they really tried to work with him. But Vincent was very upset. And I want to say here that I understand that Vincent was upset. I mean, because I can't even begin to put myself in his position. I tried this entire case to try to put myself in his position, but I just can't. But he has had some time, like, to process, like, the death. And he had his mom and his brother and his sister there with him for support. But they just kind of wanted to ask, like, when they couldn't even get through the questions, because the entire time, not even one question, okay, I'm not exaggerating, the entire time, Vincent was screaming, quite literally, uncontrollably, "Mama, I need my mama. Mama, help me. No, mama, help me. Help me, mama. I want to go home." He was just distraught. And I get it. Like, I cannot even sit up here and act like that wasn't okay. I think that was appropriate. I mean, because, like I said, I cannot even put myself in his shoes. He literally lost his whole family. And so they just said, you know what, we're going to table this. We realize that you're absolutely distraught. Let's table this until you can get back, first of all, to Bakersfield, and we will talk to you then. And so he was still a person of interest, because everybody's a person of interest until they can rule you out and corroborate your alibi. So he told them his alibi, and really at this point, the investigation really begins. So the Bakersfield Police Department get a phone call from detectives. And in this particular episode that we watched, and for your reference, this is on Hulu. It's on Peacock. We watched it on Hulu. Or you can watch it on Hulu. Like, it seems like all these streaming services cross, like, right?
Yeah, they do. And really what it is like they own, you don't know which ones own what. Like, I think, HBO Max and the ID Discovery Plus, they have stake in each other.
Right.
Whatever. It's crazy.
Right.
You can watch it on both places.
Right. So anyway, they weren't very clear to which detectives called them. So I'm not sure if the detectives in Ohio called them or the detectives in North Carolina called them. Either way, they heard from some detectives, and they determined that Vincent, his alibi is that he was in Ohio during the time of the murder. And they said that his phone pinged in Columbus, Ohio during the time of the murders, and he used his credit card on Sunday, July 6, 2003, which was the day of the murder. And so he was clearly in Ohio during the time that the murder took place. So whoever the killer was still at large, and they were able to rule him out, at least during the time of the murder. So the family was laid to rest on July 16th, 2003. By that time, Vincent made his way back to Bakersfield, and, he brought his family back to support him, and he was completely grief-stricken, according to Michelle, who was one of Joanie's closest friends, who was actually the friend that Kelsey called right after she called 911 and discovered Ernestine's body. And she said that it was such a big funeral. Like, over 3,000 people were at the funeral in attendance, and so many people from the community came, because this devastated the community of Bakersfield. I mean, people just were, she made a comment that a lot of people from the community came and they didn't even know Joanie or Ernestine.
And that makes so much sense, because I can't imagine if somebody in my community, my small community here where I live, if this were to have happened, even if I didn't know them, to know, like, when you hear about kids being murdered like this, Ernestine, who was an elderly woman being murdered like this, like it's one of those things that just grabs at your heart, and you're able to just put yourself in that person's shoes and say that is absolutely traumatic.
Oh yeah.
And you just want to be there, like, you're like, I don't even know how, because I remember, and as a real quick detour, during COVID, in the beginning days of COVID, in our neighborhood, like in our a little boy drowned in the pool.
Oh, God.
And not the pool, but the like lake in our community. And we just, as a community, rallied. Like, we did a night, like, vigilant with light, candles and stuff. That night, we sent so much food. It was just like, you're just like, what can I do to help this mother and this father who just lost their son so tragically, right?
Right.
And so I could imagine that the community came out in droves.
Yeah. And I think I wish we could be like that, definitely in times of tragedy, but just period. You know what I'm saying? That's humanity. Just be there for each other, because literally we are all we got. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm definitely so happy that Bakersfield showed up for the Harper family and just for the community, just supporting one another through that time of grief. So 7 days into the investigation, police were trying to really go over the case with a fine-tooth comb, because they wanted to find out quickly who committed this crime. Because as you said before, in the early part of the case, it was really just like, who did this? Are they coming after more people who belong to the Harper family? Are they coming after the community? Who are they coming after? This is a threat to our community. So, as you said previously, Ernestine had community involvement. She was a civil rights activist and became paranoid as a result. When you're a civil rights activist, I think of Malcolm X, I think of Martin Luther King. And yes, she was one on a smaller scale, but she purchased an antique revolver. I mean, she represented people in the community who were slighted and who were wrong. She protected them, and you gain, haters as a result. You become a target yourself. And so police really they took a closer look at who could have targeted her. And so they wanted to see if she had ever filed a police report for anybody who may have threatened her along the way. They also looked into the area itself. And she lived on the east side of Bakersfield, which was like a rougher side of the neighborhood. They wanted to see if there were any possible suspect, anybody who was a parolee, who had a violent past, who lived around there. And they took a look at the search engine in the police database, and they came up with nothing. They also found no police report that she filed, and so there was nothing there. Also, you mentioned that it did not look like there was a burglary at all, which, anytime I feel like once you've done so many or looked at so many true crime cases, once they're able to rule out that there is no burglary in process and people have just ransacked the place, like, bruh, give it up. And like, the very least you can do is steal a TV. Take some cash.
If you're gonna try to stage it like it was a burglary, not out here trying to give you advice on how to commit a murder, but if you're gonna do it, like, and try to stage it as a burglary, I mean, take the credit cards, take the cash, take some jewelry, take a TV, take an Xbox. I mean, take something so that it looks as if, there was a burglary in process.
Come on. 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not
so
5.
crazy. They always are able to rule it out.
The most, naive detective can figure that out, which is us. We can figure that out. So anyway, they're able to rule that out. And so they know whoever committed this crime had a specific reason in mind to why they wanted to kill the victims. So the autopsies basically revealed that all of the victims were killed by homicide. They all died from gunshot wounds. So here are the specifics. The children all had 1 bullet. Ernestine had 2 in the head. Joanie had 5. She also was stabbed 5 times in the back. So that's very personal. And it's passionate. It suggests personal and hate. It suggests personal and malice. You hated her, and you make sure it was up close and personal. So Joanie was the main target because she got the most blows amongst everyone else. So the one thing that Kelsey did, now Kelsey's the plug. That's what I'm gonna call her. I'm dubbing her the plug inside this case. Because without Kelsey, I'm not saying that the police would not have been able to solve this case. I think they would have. But I think that she's able to give them some pertinent information that they were able to solve it faster. So Kelsey, in her interview, she says and gives them more information about the relationship between Vincent and Joanie. And she said that Vincent, although they were married, they were separated during the time of the murders. And that Kelsey was acting very single.
Or Vincent.
Vincent was acting very single during the time of the murders when they were separated. Now I just think of the song, a liar, a cheater.
You a liar.
A cheater, a deceiver, is what she said. And she said that he would be away at 6 months at a time with somebody else. So he was just out here doing his own thing.
He was sowing his wild oats, honey.
And she said there was just bad blood between the both of them during or leading up to the time of the murder. And according to Michelle, who was sitting with the producers during the time of this episode while it was being made, Michelle said that really Joanie was struggling with trying to keep her marriage and her family together. And she was trying to reconcile her faith. Because the one thing about Joanie is that she took her faith and her marriage very seriously. You hear that she was going to 2 services on Sunday. But not just that, right? Because your faith is more than just going to church, right? She was very serious about her faith, but she was very serious about her family. And she really was trying to just reckon with the fact that her husband was out here cheating, but also trying to figure out, well, how I want my family, though. Like, I really want to try to keep my family together, and I want to honor God. And she was trying to figure out, should I leave? This man is doing me wrong. She was trying to figure out what she should do. And so this is the nature of the relationship prior to the murders. One of the detectives at the time of this case was a domestic violence expert, and he said that it is not uncommon for one spouse to murder the other, but the main thing that he was trying to figure out was the motive. Why did Vincent kill his entire family? And I think he was trying to figure out, why did Vincent kill his entire family? But also, I think that was a really good question, right? I think MD he could understand why he killed Joanie, because Joanie was the target of maybe his frustration. Is that what you were trying to get at when we were talking?
Right, yeah. For him, he felt like it wasn't beyond him to think that Vincent could have killed Joanie. But he didn't understand, but why would he kill the entire family? Right? So he's even like, but also Vincent has this ironclad alibi.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Like, I think that was the other hump that he couldn't get over, because he did have an ironclad alibi that he couldn't get over it.
He was very literally thousands of miles away.
Right.
And so for him, he was just kind of like, okay, I think that it could be, as a domestic violence expert and detective, his gut and what his experience is telling him is that this is likely Vincent. Joanie was the obvious target here. She was the one that was shot 5 times and stabbed. Obviously, the person came for Joanie. But so he's like, so that says Vincent. That's what that says to him. But then he's like, but then why would you kill Ernestine and all 3 of the kids? Right? And for me, Steph, I'm like, I can almost see how you kill Ernestine, right? Because if Ernestine has a gun and, you know, you're like trying to like make sure she don't kill you first, you kill her. But then I'm with the detective and just trying to understand, but the kids, but why the kids, right?
Right. I mean, I think that's a good question.
And so he's just trying to like.
I think he's just trying to make sense of it all. But I think you have to get past the first hurdle, which is the alibi, right? And so, you know, that's what the detectives really have to go in, and they have to, you know, go in with a fine-tooth comb and really rake over this case. And I really think what made them rake over this case just a little bit more, where maybe another detective or a well-seasoned detective would have just said, oh, well, you know, maybe this needs to just go and be a cold case. Well, these seasoned detectives said, you know, let's take another look at Vincent Brothers' credit cards. And so they looked at his transactions, but instead they went and dug up the surveillance footage for his transaction history on Sunday, July 6th, the week of the murders. And what did they find on those surveillance footage videotapes? Well, they didn't find Vincent Brothers. No, they did not. They found Melvin Brothers. And he was there at Walmart purchasing things and signing Vincent Brothers' credit card receipt and using Vincent Brothers' credit card. So they bring in Melvin and they interview him, and he immediately denies knowing about the credit card, using the credit card on July 6th. And they say, hey, look, man, we have the video surveillance tapes. So if you're lying,
we're going to find out.
We already know, and we can book you on accessory to murder. So you might want to tell the truth. And, you know, the tables turn, and so did Melvin's story. And so he says, you know, I did use the credit card. And Melvin told him that that Vincent wanted him to buy certain items on July 6th, sign his name to the receipt. And now Melvin Brother gives detective a timeline. Vincent Brother arrives in Columbus, Ohio on July 2nd. The trip was planned. He was going to stay at Melvin's house for about 7 to 10 days. They asked if he had seen Vincent from Friday, July 4th to July 8th, 2003. He said he didn't see him at the house during this period of time, which is critical because, you know, if he didn't see him during this time, well, it's very probable that he more than likely could have committed this crime, right? So they release Melvin because he cooperates and they don't charge him. And so, you know, I bet Melvin was so happy that he cooperated. And I just want to take a second to ask you guys this question. If it were your brother, what would you have done? And I'm willing to play, you know, maybe not devil's advocate, but just to give Melvin the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe, just maybe, Vincent really did just say, hey, man, I want you to use my credit card. Didn't really give him the story and say, hey, use my credit on this day to go and buy these things. Sign my name to the credit card receipt. And you don't really ask any questions. You just go and do it because your brother tells you to, right? I could see myself going to do that and just be like, why you want me to do that? Especially if it's my big brother. Like, I feel like my brother Jamal, I wouldn't ask too many questions. I probably wouldn't do the same thing for my sister either. I was like, okay, that's stupid, whatever. And I would go and do it. But then when I find out that your whole entire family was murdered, I'm asking y'all, what would you do? would you just sit on that and the police come and talk to you? Would you just be like, I don't know nothing about that credit card? Y'all answer that question in the poll. I just want to see. Then we gonna talk about it next week. That's it. That's it and that's all. Tell me what you gonna do. So, the credit card, at the most, they know that the credit card was being used by Vincent as a part of his alibi to cover up something. So, they are becoming more and more suspicious of Vincent. And it was enough probable cause to place Vincent under surveillance. And he was trying to evade the surveillance. They put a wiretap on his phone. He was trying to evade that in some type of way. So the timeline in Ohio and North Carolina, they're trying to pin this down. And they're trying to figure out what was this young man doing? What were you doing, sir? Because everything that you claim that you were doing, it doesn't seem that way. And was it possible for him to leave Ohio on July 3rd, go to Bakersfield, commit murder, then go to North Carolina by July 8th? And they discovered that he did, in fact, take a flight out to LAX, to Columbus, Ohio, but they couldn't find a return flight to Bakersfield. So they believe that, he rented a car. And, they can go look this stuff up, y'all. Come on. Ain't nothing a secret no more.
I mean, well, especially renting cars, right? You cannot, I used to work for Enterprise Rent a Car, and you cannot rent a car without a credit card. So it's not even like you can say, oh, a lot of times when you're trying to do things and evade being tracked, you use what? Cash, right? Mm-hmm. You don't, because credit can be tracked. So if you're trying to not be seen, not let anybody find out, you use cash.
And you can't even use a prepaid. You can't
cannot. You can't even use a debit card for when you rent a car. So if you have a debit card that's linked to your you have to use a credit card. So you have to use credit. So this guy just the awareness or the lack of awareness.
The lack. What was that? We did I'm going to keep going because we did another case and it was kind of like they were so unaware that that the surveillance footage was literally capturing everything.
And I know what you're talking about, but let's keep going.
Okay. So, he rents a car. And he rents a blue Dodge Neon at the Columbus, Ohio airport on July 2nd. Now, the rental car was still in service, so they were able to go and track it down. They looked at the mileage when he got it, and it was at 2,709. And when he returned it, it was returned at 8,248, July 11th. And they determined that was a little bit over 5,400 miles. That was huge for the investigation because the drive from Columbus to Bakersfield, coupled with the mileage from the drive for Columbus to Elizabeth City, North Carolina, equaled a little bit over 5,400 miles. So they are just thrilled because they're like, okay, we got him. Dead to left in their mind. But they still have to bring all of this to the prosecutor and say, hey, we got this man. But they don't feel like it's enough yet, right? They still don't feel like it's enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. You can't prove that Vincent actually did the drive. You can say that that's how much miles it takes to get here and to get here, and that's the amount of miles that was used. But that's not enough to say definitively that he actually drove there. Right? Because if I were Vincent's attorney, I could easily flip that and say, well, yeah, I just drove around the city a lot, or I drove to these other states. It doesn't prove that I actually drove all the way back to Bakersfield, right?
Right. And there were other people that drove this rental car, right?
Well, there were other people that drove the rental car, but the reason why this is so important and vital, the reason why this is such a huge break for the case is because when you rent a car, you have to, like, you, for anybody that has rented a car before, you walk around the car and you have to acknowledge any dents or dings that may be on the car, and then you acknowledge two additional things. You acknowledge how much gas is in the car, right? Because if it's on full, you got to return it on full. If it's on half, you got to return it at half. And then you write down the mileage that it currently stands. When you return, they do the same thing. They walk the car, they acknowledge what kind of dings are on the car and not on the car, they acknowledge how much gas is in the car, and then they acknowledge how much mileage is on the car. And this is all written down on it's all recorded on, a sheet of paper that the rental company keeps. So when the investigators go and pull and acknowledge that, okay, yes, he did rent this car from the Columbus, Ohio's airport, they get from the rental car company the data, the paperwork that he filled out. And so they were able to see, it was at 2,000 miles when he got it, and it was at 8,000 miles when he returned it. And so that's where they were able to determine. So it doesn't really matter who had it before and who had it after.
In that regard, it doesn't. But it does matter later on in the case. And so they're able to figure that out, and you guys will be able to see that and how it is pertinent. I moved ahead a little bit, so I apologize for that. But you guys will see that in part 2, which is next week. And we will finish out the rest of this story, the family massacre, next week. But let's go ahead and get into last week's, or kind of 2 weeks ago, the poll last week, 2 weeks ago.
You got it. They know what you mean, Steph.
Y'all know what I mean. You know what I'm trying to say.
They following.
All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It seemed like y'all enjoyed A Twist in the Tale, which was the case about DeMonte Smith. I asked you guys what aspect of the Quenisha Johnson case intrigues you, and overwhelmingly you guys said the events leading to the crime. So I agree with you guys. I think that case definitely was a doozy. And I'm so happy that I was able to share that case with you guys. And if there is an update, whenever there is an update in that case, we will be updating you guys. Now, on to the question and the answers, because I asked you guys, do you believe there is a gender bias that benefits women in the justice system? And you guys said, there was a lot.
Drum roll, please.
Okay. Yes, but it's the same. Okay. Now you mentioned something else, girl, Latrissa. But you said on a serious note, though, I think she also knew that if he tried again, she was going to shoot him. Now this was about, you were just telling me what you thought about the case. Okay, Latrissa. Okay.
So Latrissa, you think
so Latrissa said yes, but it's the same. The child in the eyes of an angel music for me at the end. So I don't remember what we said, but it was something funny. She said on a serious note, though, I think she also knew that if he tried again, she was going to shoot him. So she was talking about, she agreed that
there is a bias in the system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stephanie Renee said it depends because Black women do not receive the same treatment as a white woman.
Stephanie, I 1,000% agree with that. I think that there is layers to the bias, right? I think that overwhelmingly women are treated different, but then even it's layered, right? Like even within that, white women are treated more favorably than Black women or women of color is really what I prefer to say women of color, because I just think that truly in the justice system, women of color are not treated the same at all.
Right. Erica just said yes. DeWitt said not really. I feel evidence convicts people regardless of gender. Look at the Carla Hughes case in Mississippi, and Lithonia is pronounced like Lithonia, just for people from Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Thank you, girl. Thanks for putting this on
game. No, that's
game.
the wig. That's a man.
Oh, well, thanks for putting this on game. I think, to your point, I think that's the way that it should be. I think that the justice system should treat us all fairly, and it should be based on the evidence. I agree that that's the way it should be. I don't know if I agree that that's the way that it is.
Mm-hmm. Nikki B 24 said absolutely. ML Orr said, are y'all from Michigan? Because the way y'all said Lithonia is very much giving Michigan.
Well, all our family is from Michigan, girl, so that may make sense.
She said, I live in Georgia. I don't know what GR is. But anyways, yes, I do. Depends on the crime and how beautiful the woman is. I definitely agree with how beautiful.
I agree with
that.
I
agree
1,000%.
That.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And this girl was beautiful. She was. She's a very pretty girl.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember. I think I said Lithonia, not Lithonia. And I know people from Michigan don't say Lithonia like that.
Lithonia?
Now she do. I know I said Lithonia.
I may have said Lithonia. That's how I think it's pronounced, but I don't know how it's pronounced.
Well, I know I didn't sound like Michigan when I said that because I said it real country. But thank you for telling me it's Lithonia.
Lithonia. Okay.
Appreciate y'all. Okay, so yeah. Cool. I appreciate the feedback. I love the feedback. That was the one thing I missed last week because I was like, oh, y'all gave me some really good feedback last week. So y'all make sure on part 2 to answer the question in the polls on what your response would be if, your sibling got you in a compromising situation criminally, because that was a very compromising situation.
I can't wait to hear what you guys say, and because honestly, I can't wait to tell you what I would do.
Yes. So y'all make sure you stay tuned for part 2. Definitely continue to subscribe to paid subscription. We're going to put some new stuff on there for you guys, as well as some more bonus content that you're just going to get regularly. Like last week, we didn't put anything on the main platform, but if you was a part of the paid subscription, you still got an episode, even though we skipped out on the main platform. I'm just saying.
Boom.
Join the crew, bro. Like, just do it.
Behind the paywall. Let's do it.
All right. We'll see y'all next week. I love you. Bye.